Time being 1:14, we'll call the applicant review panel meeting back to order. I'd like to welcome Miss Linda Akutagawa. Did I say that correctly?
It's close.
Okay.
Akutagawa.
Akutagawa. Thank you. Welcome for your interview for today. I'm going to turn the time right over to Mr. Chris Dawson to read you the 5 standard questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Ms. Akutagawa. I'm going to read you 5 standard questions that the panel has requested that each applicant respond to. Are you ready?
Yes.
First question. What skills and attributes should all commissioners possess? What skills or competencies should the commission possess collectively? Of the skills, attributes, and competencies that each commissioner should possess, which do you possess? In summary, how will you contribute to the success of the commission?
So to the question of what skills and attributes should all commissioners possess, and specifically what skills or competencies should the commission possess collectively, I believe that in addition to the 3 that were noted on the website, relevant analytical skills, ability to be impartial, appreciation for California's diverse demographics and geography, I also believe that these are some other skills and attributes that the commission should have collectively. 1, curiosity. 2, open-mindedness. 3, critical thinking, or the ability to discern fact from fiction, objectivity versus opinion. Next would be number 4, ability to balance competing needs. 5, long-standing knowledge of California, and in my opinion, at least 10 plus years of residency, given the task that this commission is being charged with. Next would be legal knowledge, understanding of political landscapes, common sense, and people before party. I think that the task of redistricting is one that I think collectively, while each person may not have each one, I think collectively this is the skills and attributes, competencies that I would love to see on a commission as a resident of the state of California. B, in terms of the skills, attributes, and competencies that each commissioner should possess, which do I possess? I believe that in no particular order, I believe that I do have the ability to be impartial. I believe that I am open-minded. I most definitely believe that I have an appreciation for California's diverse demographics and geography. I do have a long-standing knowledge of California as a native Californian. I believe that I have curiosity, as well as the analytical and critical thinking skills, and also the ability to balance competing needs. In summary, I believe I would contribute to the success of this commission in 2 ways. And I think when I say 2 ways because I believe that there are 2 ways to measure success of the commission. One is the commission's end product, which is the redistricting map. And second is the commission's process. So with the end product or the redistricting map, collectively, I believe that all commissioners would bring our skills and attributes to ensure redistricting that meets the following objectives: fact-based, objective, credible, sound, clear, and legally defensible. Individually, I believe that I would contribute to the credibility of the commission's work and therefore its success by bringing to the forefront my experiences shaped as a minority within a minority growing up in California. And now as a leader in one of our state's fast-growing communities, for me, I will always carry memories and feelings shaped by invisibility and marginalization. Through my work, I both seek out and am often exposed to the demographic, geographic, and economic diversity of California. I believe that my work and my experiences growing up in California motivates me to be mindful of others who may not be part of the larger majority or larger minority, and it pushes me to ensure that all diverse points of view are included, balanced, and considered. I believe that I'll also contribute to the objectivity, soundness, clarity of the Commission's redistricting work through my values and beliefs in fairness and equity. It drives my actions to be open-minded, curious, and also questioning of the status quo. My values also include a strong belief in the importance of high-quality work, and I will expect to draw often from my analytical and critical thinking skills to ensure that the Commission's work will be fact-based and legally defensible. However, for the Commission to be successful, and achieve an end product that meets all of these desired outcomes, I believe we must all commit to a process in which we all listen actively and carefully, ask the hard questions, be willing to challenge each other and the status quo, be willing to be wrong, engage fully, ensure inclusivity, seek and foster diverse perspectives, and most importantly, follow the rule of law and apply appropriate legal principles and standards. And given that this is a high-stakes process that will be influenced by competing agendas and perhaps large egos, I believe I can bring in my abilities as an experienced and longtime facilitator and utilize my skills, such as active listening, ensuring equal participation, and moving the discussion forward to meet goals and objectives. I've also learned that focusing on common objectives that also results in benefits for a broader group of people or organizations often yields greater and more impactful results for all. Also, additionally, as CEO of a nonprofit organization, I often have to balance the needs and interests of my staff with the needs and interests of my board of directors. And I believe that I would bring those competencies such as impartial consideration of all perspectives, careful analysis of data, thoughtful consideration of the needs of the minority as well as the majority, keeping in mind the greater good and not what is beneficial to an individual or a single entity, as well as additional skills, styles, and abilities to contribute to the success of the commission. I guess question number 2, I guess. Should I just move on to that?
Well, okay. Should I go ahead and let me ask question number 2? Work on the commission requires members of different political backgrounds to work together. Since the 2010 commission was selected and formed, the American political conversation has become increasingly polarized, whether in the press, on social media, and even in our own families. What characteristics do you possess, and what characteristics should your fellow commissioners possess that will protect against hyperpartisanship? What will you do to ensure that the work of the commission is not seen as polarized or hyperpartisan and avoid perceptions of political bias and conflict?
Thank you for that question. I think in terms of the characteristics that I believe I possess that will protect against hyperpartisanship, I believe that I do bring the ability to be impartial and open-minded, also curious, and also bringing my analytical and critical thinking skills. And as I had said earlier, I think that ability to discern fact from fiction and also to discern objective opinion versus subjective opinion. And the ability to balance competing needs. I will share that I do come from a politically mixed family, and so I've learned to navigate different political perspectives and philosophies. And also, being a native Californian, I very much have an appreciation for our state's diverse demographics and geography, and also having been here for my entire life, definitely, I believe, a longstanding knowledge of the state, having seen it just evolve in the way it has and as it continues to evolve. I believe that fellow commissioners should also possess the skills, as I mentioned, that were on the website, the relevant analytical skills and the ability to be impartial and appreciation for our state's diverse demographics and geography. And I think those 3 were on there because I think those are the minimal characteristics that we should all have. But in addition to that, I think it would be nice again for our other fellow commissioners to bring on curiosity and open-mindedness as well too, in that critical thinking skill and the ability to balance competing needs. I would also say people before party. I think those things would at least be able to ensure that we'll be looking for that common good and what is going to be the best for the state of California and its residents. In terms of what would I do to ensure that the work of the commission is not seen as polarized or hyperpartisan or avoid perceptions of political bias and conflict. When I responded to the question above, as well as the previous questions and also the questions on the application form, I believe that I responded to those questions with that particular question in mind. How do we avoid hyperpartisanship or perceptions of political bias and conflict? I think that having that is definitely one of the influencing factors in the way I think I would shape all of my answers. I think given the state of our political discourse nationally as well as just in terms of our regional and local politics, the perceptions may be hard to avoid, but as much as possible, I would seek to stay focused and remind the other members of the Commission that we have a larger vision and mission to accomplish the successful achievement of the Commission's end goal and product. And additionally, while this may seem cliche, I think I would point to my background and my work as a facilitator and also as a nonprofit CEO. I would suggest and encourage an opening commission retreat with all the commissioners to quickly build understanding and relationships amongst the commissioners and facilitate a sense of team amongst the commissioners. I think I've found that the more we can build relationships, build trust, get to know each other better, I think the more we're going to be willing to listen to each other, to understand each other, and to also see some other different perspectives versus just immediately just saying you're this and you're that because of what your political beliefs may be. I would also encourage continued team building and relationship building activities to reinforce the commitment and sense that the commissioners are all a united team working towards a common goal. I believe that when most, if not all, of the commissioners across various political perspectives can maintain and model some level of cohesiveness, then I think it will lend greater credibility and assurance within the community that the work is not polarized or hyper-partisan. I think that becomes really important because how we model it, how we talk to each other, how we interact with each other, I think sends messages to people as to whether or not they can trust what we're doing, how we're doing it, and whether or not the end product is something that they too can believe in, that is something that was very carefully thought through and was taking into the account many, many different diverse perspectives and needs. I will also, I believe that I also draw upon my values and belief in fairness and equity and high quality work and the behaviors that result from those beliefs and values, such as open-mindedness, curiosity, and the quest to discern fact from fiction to avoid perceptions of political bias and conflict. I think to me that's really important. The Commission would have a really important task, and I believe that being able to ensure that it could be done as best as possible in a way that would be seen as being free of bias would be, I think, a really important goal that we should all work together towards. And lastly, and as importantly, I would advocate and push for transparency and regular and, if possible, frequent communication with communities and stakeholders. I think it's important that they also understand what we're doing and what we're going through so that they can be brought along on the journey that the Commission is going to be on to ensure a fair and equitable redistricting process. And for me, I think that's going to be a really important part of ensuring that we would not be seen as being hyper-partisan or politically biased.
Thank you. Question 3. What is the greatest problem the Commission could encounter, and what actions would you take to avoid or respond to this problem?
For me, I mean, there's a lot of different things that I think that could be encountered, but I think for me, what really struck me the most is that communities don't trust the Commission and eventually the end product. I think, referring back to your hyper-partisan question, I think that there is a real suspicion of government, but also about what government entities are producing. And that's where I think being able to discern fact from fiction is going to be important, but more importantly, to be able to help provide a way in which the communities that we'll be representing and working with can trust in what we as a Commission would be doing. I think it's important to be fair, to care, to be inclusive, and to be also common sense. And so the actions that I would take to try to avoid those problems, I think first starts with communication. It's communication, communication, communication. And as I just mentioned previously, I would advocate and push for as much transparency as we can legally provide. I would also push for and advocate for regular and, if possible, frequent communication with communities and stakeholders. I think the more people feel like they're being informed, that they're kept engaged, and that they're being brought along, I think that way then there's less likelihood of misinformation being pushed, misinformation being shared. I would also advise that the Commission identify and get to know key influencers in various communities, ensure that they too are kept up to date and informed of the work and progress of the Commission. I think that will also be an important way of ensuring not only more trust, but also hopefully less likelihood of perceptions and charges of hyperpartisanship and political bias. And lastly, I think it would be important for us to create commitment in the sense that commissioners are all a united team. Again, I think if we're seen as being at cross purposes, then that is going to create, I think, the kind of the soil for distrust amongst all the communities that will be relying on us. And I think that's where it's important that we come together as a united group. And I believe that when most, if not all, of the commissioners across various political perspectives can maintain and model this level or some level of cohesiveness, then it will lend greater credibility and assurance within the community that the work can be trusted.
Thank you. Question 4. If you are selected, you will be one of 14 members of the Commission, which is charged with working together to create maps of the new districts. Please describe a situation where you had to work collaboratively with others on a project to achieve a common goal. Tell us the goal of the project, what your role in the group was, and how the group worked through any conflicts that arose. What lessons would you take from this group experience to the Commission if selected?
So I have 2 examples that I want to share with you. The first example is using my role as the CEO of my organization. We recently underwent a strategic planning process, and together with our leadership team on staff and our board of directors, we underwent essentially a 1.5 year long process to determine and to develop this strategic plan. We worked with a consultant, but we also had a strategic plan committee of the board that also helped with with guiding and representing the board's perspective and working with myself and 2 of my executive team members to produce eventually what would be our strategic plan for the next 3 years. And so my role in the group or in this particular project was both as the lead staff person, as the CEO, but also working as that representative to the board as well too, and interacting and liaising with the board committee. And I believe I described myself, and I think I described this in my application as well too. I feel that I'm the fulcrum. I'm the one that creates that balance between the board and the staff, and it's just being able to undergo that kind of process is interesting. This is my 3rd strategic plan, but this year was the most interesting in the sense that this was the greatest level of engagement that I've had from the board. And it was great in the sense that they were much more invested in being able to provide input in what they wanted to see in the strategic plan. Interestingly, in the previous years, there's been some engagement, but not to the level that we had this year. And I will say that there were some perhaps rough spots that had come up during the course of the planning phases that we had. I think there were some disagreements in both approach, but also in terms of some of the conclusions that we had. And at times it was from my staff side. At times it was from the board side. At times it was a result of our consultant. And I believe that I was the one in the middle, or at least that's the role that I chose to take, is the one in the middle, ensuring that all sides were being heard, that we were coming together, having conversations. At times it also meant that I had to have one-on-one conversations with staff, with the consultant, with the board, and then having joint conversations where appropriate, and then having a larger conversation with the board committee, the consultant, and the staff to be able to resolve and come to a place that we were all agreeable to, that we all felt that we could be comfortable with. And I think a lot of it was centered around the idea that we all had a common goal, that we're doing, what we're trying to do is what's best for the organization. And I think that that common goal makes things easier. And there are times when there were compromises. There were times when it was more a matter of clarification of what was meant on one group's perspective over another group's perspective. I think eventually what we ended up with is a product that we're comfortable with, that we can all feel that we can very proudly stand behind. And so for that, that's something that I feel like I've really taken I continue to learn from these kinds of opportunities in terms of working with people with different interests, different agendas, different perspectives, but we all share a common goal. I want to share another project example in which it's a little bit different from my organization, but it's related to my organization. So as CEO of my organization, my nonprofit organization, I'm also part of coalitions and partnerships with other organizations. And there's this one in particular called the Alliance for Board Diversity. It's a national collaboration of 4 diverse leadership organizations, which includes my organization representing Asian and Pacific Islanders, along with organizations representing Black African Americans, Hispanic Latinos, and women. And around this particular project, what we're trying to do is to advocate for greater diversity on Fortune 500 corporate boards. And within that, this year, I'm in my second year right now, my role is as chair of this Alliance for Board Diversity. Now, this is a all-volunteer group. It's not a formally constructed partnership or collaboration or organization. It is an informal organization of our four organizations, and all working together to move towards this larger goal of seeing greater diversity on corporate boards. And so as part of it, we also have a partnership with Deloitte Consulting, and around partnering around a research report that we every 2 years put out together jointly. And recently there were some conflicts that arose in regards to some perceptions of not respecting the terms of the agreement that our organizations have with them. And we recently had a joint meeting with all of our organizations and Deloitte. What was interesting is each of the different organizations, the partner organizations, had a different perspective on the situation related to this conflict that was perceived with Deloitte. And some organizations were in different places. Other organizations were in completely other places, partly because we all have different relationships individually with Deloitte. Some were we don't care, let's just tell them what's wrong, why we're bothered. Others were, let's be more careful, I don't think that there's any harm meant on their end. Others were, well, we need to say something, but we just need to be careful about how we go about saying it. So the joint meeting that we had with them recently was the solution. What we did is we ended up taking on a little bit softer, somewhat more indirect approach to addressing the conflict. And my role was to balance the needs and interests of all the other three organizations to ensure that their needs were all met, but at the same time addressing or at least informing and bringing up with Deloitte that there was an issue that came up that was really bothering the partners. And so it was a difficult conversation, but all in all, working together with another partner, my partner and I were able to diplomatically bring up the issue and have a discussion that then led to, I believe, a resolution that I think satisfied all of us. And so I believe that that's an approach that I would also bring to the commission as well too. I'm more than happy to have difficult conversations, but I also believe that working together in partnership with everybody collaboratively will take us to a place where I think we can continue to work more effectively together.
Time check, we have 4 minutes, 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Okay.
Question 5. A considerable amount of the Commission's work will involve meeting with people from all over California who come from very different backgrounds and a wide variety of perspectives. If you are selected as a Commissioner, what skills and attributes will make you effective at interacting with people from different backgrounds and who have a variety of perspectives? What experiences have you had that will help you be effective at understanding and appreciating people and communities of different backgrounds and who have a variety of perspectives?
I'll repeat some of the lines that I've said before that I think are important for commissioners to have. I think if I'm selected as a commissioner, I think some of the skills and attributes that I would bring in interacting with people from different backgrounds and who have a variety of perspectives are, I think, the ability to be open-minded and having an appreciation for our state's diverse demographics and geography, and my knowledge of California, as well as my curiosity about people. I think everybody, one of us has something interesting to share, has interesting backgrounds and stories, and I'm always curious as to what makes people tick, and I'm interested in hearing their stories. I think in terms of the experiences that I've had, I wrote on my application that I'm a lifelong native Californian. I was born and raised here in Southern California. I went to school here. I got my college degree here. I lived my adult life here. And I oftentimes felt that growing up as a minority within a minority, California was a different place. I often felt that my voice as an Asian American, as well as I think for other diverse Californians as well too, was regularly erased or rendered invisible and oftentimes counted really for nothing. We were certainly not oftentimes cited in terms of surveys and polls that often were put in place. Today, I know California is in a very different place. Diversity is one of our state's greatest strengths, and I think ensuring that our diversity is reflected and honored in our civic and political process, including a commission like the Redistricting Commission, is important in terms of fair and equal representation and ensuring that our perspectives are reflected. And I grew up in the working class suburbs of the San Gabriel Valley, and there growing up, it was not the kind of community that it is now. It was a majority Mexican American kind of community, working class white, and I felt a very strong affinity with all of my friends who were at the time Mexican American and white, with very little Asians, although now it's a very different kind of place. But I think what also has helped is that my immigrant father has instilled in me a broader appreciation of California's diverse landscape. And so I really very much look fondly upon some of our family road trips across all regions of California during my formative years. And as a student at Cal State LA, I saw that it was a environment that the diversity of the student body was reflective of the changing demographics. And I lived and worked for nearly 2 years in San Diego. Today, I'm leading a nonprofit organization. I travel all across the state, and I feel like it exposes me to the demographic, geographic, and economic diversity of California. I'm working with people from corporate leadership all the way to student activists who are coming from working class and other low-income backgrounds, and really just just being able to work across all different kind of economic sectors. I've had the fortunate privilege of being able to participate in programs through Asian Americans Advancing Justice, a program called Leadership Development in Interethnic Relations, the California Connections program, and also on Southern California Edison's Consumer Advisory Panel has really helped to expose me to a broad range of different people.
All right, thank you. We'll now go to panel questions. Each of the panel members will have 20 minutes to ask his or her questions, and we'll start with the chair, Ms. Dickinson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Akutagawa. So I was looking at your diversity or your essay on impartiality, and you talked about your experience as a member of Southern California Edison's Consumer Advisory Panel, and how it challenged you to listen to and consider opposing opinions and perspectives and reconcile it with the needs of the company and the larger customer. Could you provide an example of a time that you changed your mind after considering certain information when participating on this panel?
Thanks for asking that question. I think I would, we were presented often with a lot of different aspects of the Southern California Edison business. And I would say one of the issues that really sticks in my mind even today is really thinking about how Edison's relationship with what they would call, I guess it's like the future grid. The way the new electricity and what's that going to mean in terms of the way that they're going to deliver electricity. And what was really interesting is being able to see from their perspective how they've been also able to shift to the use of or leveraging solar energy. I guess I always thought solar energy was it would be something that would be good, but I didn't really see how it aligned with the Southern California Edison energy kind of plan. And it was interesting to see how they explained how they're able to, I guess they're not the generators necessarily. So I'm doing a terrible job actually of explaining it, but just the way they explained it, that eventually they're going to be able to have people, if they have solar panels, the company is going to be able to draw upon those solar panels as part of their energy transmission. It was very interesting in the sense that there was some different perspectives on how solar energy would be used. I think it was just seen as something that would be detrimental to the company, even though there is a move towards non-traditional electrical generation, and being able to understand that and hearing from different people who had different perspectives around the role of solar energy as well as other green energy uses was pretty interesting for me as somebody who wasn't very well versed in it. And I'll be honest, even though I have concerns about being much more environmentally friendly, I also thought about how is this going to help us, because not everybody is going to be able to afford solar energy, and the kind of programs, and I think other perspectives that, or more programs to help bring these opportunities to more people are things that I'm watching with interest now.
Okay, thank you. So you've been working at LEAP, Leadership Education for Asian Pacifics, since 1992?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about LEAP? I'm not really that familiar with it.
Sure. So we are a leadership development organization founded to, as I like to say, grow, develop, and untap the talent of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander leaders that I believe is in all of our community members. I like to say that the work that we do spans from the classroom to the boardroom, across various life stages, and a lot of the work that we primarily are doing is helping people transition from one life stage to the next. So we're working with students in college transition into their first jobs, their early career jobs. We're working with people who have been working in their roles, whether it's in corporations, nonprofits, higher education institutions, government sector roles, working, transitioning from their early career roles to mid-career, and then from mid-career roles to transitioning more into executive level roles. We believe that that's where our sweet spot has been in terms of being able to help people really find how they can best be effective as leaders within the kind of roles that they are now, but more importantly, what they could do as they look towards their next step in their career.
You do that through training, advocacy, both?
So our work is primarily leadership development programming. We do multiple day programs that are integrated and really helping people to discover themselves. And all of our programming is from a Asian, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander cultural lens, really helping them to discover how they can be their most authentic self as a leader. And so we have multiple day programs, as I mentioned, that are integrated across days as well as over several months. We do cohort-driven programs, and then we also provide workshops that are half day, 1 day, and then we also do a lot of educational work in terms of presentations about Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders as well too, in terms of depending on what an organization or a client may want from us. In this time of COVID-19, we're also doing a lot of work to help keep our community members connected together. So what we're providing is virtual conversations based around themes that people are interested in, and really just trying to provide opportunities for what I would call mental resiliency. I think right now we're all working at home. We have our families in some cases for those who are fortunate to have families with them. People may have coworkers if they are working remotely. But I know that over the course of the day, as I think about how we just normally go about our days, we oftentimes interact with people, and we don't have that. So right now, random people, just someone that we might run into that we know at lunch, or somebody we'll meet for the first time. Those little kinds of interactions are something that we're trying to replicate right now. And so we're pivoting in terms of being able to provide something for our community while we're in this moment of COVID-19. And so it's also helping us to shift in terms of the kind of programming that we'll be providing, hopefully, to more people. But a lot of our work is face-to-face. And again, really trying to help people discover and really leverage their most authentic selves from the cultural perspective, either as someone who's Asian American or Pacific Islander.
Thank you. So based on the work that you do with LEAP, what skill sets do you think would translate and assist you in connecting with communities throughout the state in the work of the commission?
Well, I think for me, in terms of the work that I do, a lot of what I do is the leadership development. I think really helping people to discover their best self in terms of their best and most authentic self. I think also what I would be able to do, and I think this is normally just how I operate, is I'm curious about people. I think the work that I do is centered around that curiosity of people, both in terms of knowing them, but also I would consider myself to a degree an educator as well too, and helping people to understand my communities. And so I think that that kind of back and forth and being able to have exchanges and to learn from each other is something that I think is something that I would bring to the commission. And I think with that comes with that also an open-mindedness, because I think as I'm curious about people, I try really hard not to go in with a preformed notion. And I had actually a moment, this happened about a couple years ago. I travel around the country for the work that I do, I deliver training as well as just running my organization. Part of what I do is I deliver training as well too. And so I've been facilitating for close to 30 years now. And a couple years ago, I had the chance to do some work at NASA in Florida. And again, I just take people at who they are, or at least that's what I try my best to do. And I was there for 2 consecutive days, and each day I was having lunch with the people that I was working with. They were in the diversity and inclusion area, and so we would have lunch together, and we would just have conversations. I think just normal conversations, everyday conversations that I think people who are just breaking bread would do. And it was on the second day, and one of the individuals who I was sitting having lunch with made a comment that it was interesting to me. She goes, "Oh, this has been really nice. I just didn't expect that. I thought because you're from California, I thought you would be different." And I thought, oh, I never thought about that I would be different. I just thought we're just people, and I never thought about it in this kind of way. But it struck me that they must have thought or had some preformed notions about me, maybe because of my ethnicity, maybe because I'm a woman, maybe obviously because I'm from California. But I think just in having just the kind of normal conversation, I think they were able to realize that I'm as much a normal person as they are as well too. And I think we found commonalities.
Thank you. So in a lot of your work, you've advocated for Asians and Pacific Islanders. What do you see as the Commission's role in advocacy?
Well, yeah, a lot of my role is advocating for the Asian and Pacific Islander communities, and I would say that that's probably my primary focus. I will also say that I'm an advocate for all diverse communities as well too. I think that we are only as strong as all of us standing together, and I think in terms of the Commission and its role in advocacy, advocacy is at least for me, it's a little bit of a loaded word. I think it depends on what you mean by advocacy. There's advocacy as in I'm going to lobby for one position or one perspective only. Or advocacy could also mean that I'm here to represent the viewpoints of a group of people or groups of people, but at the same time to ensure that their perspectives are not overlooked or ignored or left out, but not at the cost of marginalizing another group. And so for me, it's more advocacy in the latter way that I think in terms of the commission's role, advocacy is to ensure that all of the diverse communities within California are included in this whole entire process, that their needs are also considered very seriously. And I know we have so much diversity, and even within the larger diverse groups, there's even more levels of diversity. I'll just use the Asian American community as an example. I know it's easy sometimes for people to think that we're monolithically all the same. You know, the stereotypes about us as being the model minority is pretty common in terms of the work that I do and what I hear. But we're also a community that when I present and talk to others who are interested in learning more about the Asian American community, I speak to them and I say, you know, one of the first things I say is we are a community of extremes and we have a lot of diversity, but oftentimes people see just one end, which is we're very wealthy and well-educated, but we have everybody in between, and we have also a significant portion that are struggling, that are not as well educated, that are not as wealthy, and have great needs, but oftentimes may be overlooked. And so, and I know that's the same in the other diverse communities as well too. And so I think our role as the commission is to ensure that all of those different perspectives and advocating for all of the communities that may be overlooked or marginalized are going to be brought in.
Thank you.
We have 3 minutes, 42 seconds remaining.
So the first 8 members of the commission are selected randomly, and then they are tasked with selecting the next 6. If you're one of the first 8, what would you be looking for in those final 6 commissioners?
I think I would like to know just what the first 8 commissioners would bring, and I would like to look for commissioners that would help to balance out and can complement the skill sets and the competencies and the attributes of the 8 that have already been randomly selected. I think the more balanced and the more well-rounded group that we can have, then the likelier then that we're going to have a product, an end result that is going to be, again, I think not only much stronger, but the likelihood is one that will be seen as both credible and sound and legally defensible as well too. I think that I will also acknowledge, having done the work that I've done, that diverse teams can bring conflict with it, but I think if there are ways in which we can find how we can all find that common ground, I think we're going to come out better together for having complementary but diverse skill sets on the commission.
Thank you. I don't have further questions at this time, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Belknap for his 20 minutes.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. I want to follow up on a few of your answers today, mostly because I'm curious, just to fill in a few blanks for me. You've said a couple times that you're a minority within a minority. What do you mean by that?
So, and I would say, so I grew up here in California, and the California today is a very different California from when I was growing up. I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley, and my family was the only Asian family in the region that at least, and when I call region, I mean literally as I think about being a child in the area that I grew up in, within the blocks that I lived in, we were the only really Asian family in the nearby area, and everybody else around me was Mexican American. And I tell people, it's like, I very specifically say Mexican American because at the time when I was growing up, everybody was Mexican American. There was not the kind of Latino diversity that I think we have now. And we also had white working class folks as well too. And growing up through K through 12, high school, and even to a degree, maybe even into college, but more just thinking about growing up into high school, I used to look at the yard signs for local city council elections, for mayor, and I was an avid reader. So even in junior high and high school, I would regularly read the newspaper to just understand what's going on around me. And I always noted with interest that whenever there were polls taken in the state of California, especially the exit polls or other kinds of polls about what do people in California think, I always noted that there was always Black, Hispanic, and white on the kind of polling numbers that they collected, but never any polling on Asians. And within that, I realized that I was part of a demographic in the state that didn't have a voice, and we were a minority within the minority group. And today it's a little bit different, I think now, but it is different, but it isn't different. So Asian Americans now make up the second largest minority group in the state of California after Latinos. But yet it still is interesting to me that polls could be conducted in the state of California and there is not an Asian American perspective reflected. It's not every time, but I do see it once in a while, and I think it's interesting that in a state that has nearly 15% Asians, an Asian population in the state of California, that they couldn't find enough to, get polling numbers on. And so it's just interesting to me. I think that's why I speak about being a minority within a minority. And I think that has influenced me in terms of the way I see the world, the way I do my work, the way in which I feel like when there are minority perspectives, even within the larger Asian community, I feel it's important to ensure that other minority voices are at least encouraged to be included, to speak up, and also cognizant of my role that when I'm in more diverse spaces too, that I have to speak up as well too, and to be able to provide at least a perspective as well.
All right, thank you. I'm also curious, in your answer to question 4, you talked about an issue related to Deloitte and a coalition that had been put together. So what was the issue related to Deloitte that was bothering some of the partners in the coalition?
So, yeah, thank you for asking that. I didn't know how much detail to give. So we have an agreement between the 4 partners and Deloitte. So we jointly put together a research report that looks at, it's a census of Fortune 500 board directors that are African American, Hispanic, Asian, and women. And Deloitte is our partner in terms of gathering some level of data, and then our groups each do some additional level of data verification. And as part of that project, we're in our second round with Deloitte. And as part of the agreement, one of the things that our 4 partner organizations were very specific about saying is that should any partner want to utilize the joint data, that they do need to notify the other partners and let us know. What had happened is that we had a point of conflict between our 4 organizations and Deloitte around including in this census report our recommendations for what companies could do to increase diversity or to get more diverse board members onto their boards. And in this particular case, Deloitte was very adamant that they did not want to include those recommendations in our census report. So we thought, okay, then we'll just do the census report, and our 4 organizations as a joint alliance for board diversity will just issue our own separate report with our recommendations. We were getting ready to do so. We had been trying to notify Deloitte that we were going to be coming out with this, and we were getting ready to do so, and they then notified us that they are coming out with their own version of the recommendations in partnership with a completely different organization, referring to our data, not giving us really any kind of credit other than a very small line embedded within a very dense press release. And you could imagine that the partners were not too happy, particularly the lead research organization partner on this, and they were not too happy to see that the work that we had done had been taken advantage of, and especially because they were the ones that were the reason that we did not go out with that in our joint report. And so we had to have a conversation with the lead partner from Deloitte about it. Each of the other organizations, they all have varying relationships with Deloitte, so there was some desire to preserve that relationship. And even though my organization doesn't have a relationship with Deloitte, I still have to keep into account the needs of my other 3 partners, and we wanted to find a way in which we can successfully resolve this without blowing up the entire relationship. And so I think we were able to do that. There's still some grumbling, but I think for the most part, I think people are satisfied that we had our say. The lead partner was put on notice that what we agreed upon was not followed, and that we'll see what's going to happen going forward. But she is aware that we were pretty unhappy about what had happened.
And does the coalition provide...
Maybe that was a little more, more than you want to know.
No, that's what I wanted to know. Does the coalition provide funding for the research that Deloitte does, or do you provide data?
We provide data, so
Okay.
we each are responsible. So there's no funding that's provided. Each organization, I guess you could say, provides our own resources from each of our organizations to conduct the work. So Deloitte does the initial round of data gathering, and then that data is shared with each of our other organizations. And then what we do is data verification. And so each of our teams are responsible for data verification. And then Deloitte, once the data is revised or verified, then Deloitte is responsible for PR and the production of the final report that is distributed.
Okay, thank you. And one other follow-up question. So LEAP, the organization you're CEO of, how does it get its funding?
So we get our funding from various sources. We get corporate sponsorships, foundation funding, and individual donor, and also fee for service. So what we do is the leadership development programs that we provide. We have either straight fee-for-service relationships where a company will hire us to come in and provide leadership training for their employees, or as part of the sponsorship packages that we have, or the sponsorship relationships that we have with our sponsors, will also include some of our leadership development programming as part of the sponsorship package options.
Okay. Does LEAP engage in any legislative advocacy?
No.
Okay. So,
other than we're asked sometimes to sign on to a letter, we'll do that related to things that may be in alignment with either Asian American community, Asian or Pacific Islander community issues, or issues related to nonprofit organizations. But we do not do any lobbying on either in Sacramento or in Washington, D.C.
okay, thank you. You have spent the majority of your professional career advocating for Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. I'd like you to provide us an example or an experience that you have had that would demonstrate to other ethnic communities that they should trust you to listen to their concerns and advocate for them if warranted.
Sure. So I think one would be the Alliance for Board Diversity example. I did say that we don't lobby. I did, though, have the opportunity, for example, to testify before the House Financial Services Committee related to the Alliance for Board Diversity and specifically around corporate board diversity. I was there, though, in my role as chair of the Alliance for Board Diversity. So I was very cognizant of my role there as the chair of the Alliance for Board Diversity, that I'm not there just to advocate for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and having more from my community on corporate boards. I was very careful, and I was also very much cognizant that I wanted to make sure that I equally represented a perspective that was representative of the Black African American community, the Hispanic Latino community, and then of course the Asian and Pacific Islander community as well too. And then of course also bringing in data or sharing data with the committee about the representation of women across all of those different ethnic communities. I also have another example that I would give to you. I oftentimes partner with other different ethnic communities, in particular in Southern California. Last year, I had the opportunity to partner with the African American Board Leadership Institute, the California Latino Leadership Institute, the LA African American Women's Public Policy Institute, the Women's Business Enterprise Council, and also the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council. And that was around an opportunity to get or educate our communities, our diverse communities, around opportunities on state commission boards and commissions. And so it did feature Assemblywoman Sydney Kamlager-Dove for that particular event. But I definitely look for ways, and the executive director of the African American Board Leadership Institute and we oftentimes are looking for ways where we can partner together. We've had some other projects that we've tried doing some work on jointly together, some which don't always materialize because the funding doesn't come through, but where it is that we can, we do try to work together. And I believe that as much as I can, I do try to advocate for other communities in addition to my own. I believe that in terms of success for the Asian and Pacific Islander communities, I think we also need to advocate for others as well too, because I think, we are here because others have done the same for us. I believe it's important that we do the same for others as well too.
All right, thank you. One more question. Can you walk us through an example of an analysis you have performed where you had to compile and analyze data and other information?
Time check, we have 5 minutes, 20 seconds remaining.
Okay. I think one of the things, I guess I would point to, and I think I shared this in my application. I was asked to do a scholarly article in which I did have to gather data as well too. I think in terms of, I'll be honest, I think in terms of that one, it's data that I was familiar with, but it was looking for data, and it was also a practitioner's point of view in terms of leadership in the Asian American community. But I am oftentimes looking for and gathering data for the workshops and presentations that I give. In that particular article, I was looking for representation of Asian Americans in different industry sectors and looking at different sources. I will say that Google is awesome. And it has helped a lot in terms of looking for the kind of data that may be out there. If you're asking, or if you're wondering, do I do a lot of statistical analysis and things like that, I will say that that's not something that I do or have had a background in terms of my career. But I do look for regularly, I think, data that will help to tell the story that I'm trying to tell. And unfortunately, sometimes it's out there and sometimes it's not. But I try as best as I can to ensure that what I'm trying to explain is also backed up by data as well too. I just don't want to leave it to just it being my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I have no further questions.
Thank you. We'll turn the time over now to Mr. Coe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Ms. Akutagawa. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. You serve on the boards of several organizations that advocate for the rights and advancement of the Asian Pacific Islander community, as well as advancement of women. And I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about your roles on those boards and also why you choose to serve on those boards.
So I serve on, I'll start with the Asian Pacific Planning and Policy Council. I serve on that one. So on pretty much all of them right now, partly also because of my role at my organization, it's hard to take on something more than other than being on that particular board. But the APCON or A3PCON board, that's one of my more recent ones that I serve on. I choose to serve on that one because it is an umbrella organization of all of the various Asian and Pacific Islander serving organizations in Southern California. It's one in which I believe it's important not only that I be involved in, but so it helps me to understand what the challenges as well as the issues that other organizations and other communities in and around Southern California are facing. I'm also on the board of the Asian and Asian American Institute at California State University, Los Angeles. That one I'm on that particular board mainly because it's my alma mater, and I'm trying to find a way in which I can give back more to the school, and the previous director was someone that I had gotten to know, and when she formed this organization or this institute, she asked me to serve on it. She has since stepped down. There's a new person that's been on board. It's a little less active than it was previously, and so that one I still sit on, but we don't get together or meet as frequently as we had in the past before that. I also serve on the Asian Women's Leadership Network. It is a network of Asian women leaders. The intent when they originally started was to be a national network, but they're more right now of a network that is based in New York City. I am still committed to that particular organization. I served as a vice president on that network, but I remain committed to it mainly because of my relationship with the woman who's the president of that particular organization, and I believe that it's important for me to support her as well as support the organization. I also serve on Japanese American Community Services. It is a community grant-making organization, and this is also something that I chose to serve on mainly because the bulk of my work, as you could see, is within a broader pan-Asian American community setting, and I don't do as much within the Japanese American community, even though that's my ethnicity. And this was the one connection that I had in terms of serving in a capacity that helped or enabled me to be engaged in a specifically Japanese American kind of setting. I think I also mentioned that I have been on some other boards through Southern California Edison's Consumer Advisory Panel, which I am no longer on. It's been about now 2.5, 3 years since was last on that board. I am currently an appointee to the California Department of Insurance, their Insurance Diversity Task Force. And I served previously as the vice chair of the task force, but right now I am a member of the task force. And the other, perhaps two things that I would mention, it's not necessarily formally a board, but that would be the Alliance for Board Diversity. I'm currently serving as the chair of this national collaboration. And then LEAP, the organization that I run, is also involved in a partnership with the Anti-Defamation League in Southern California. They formed what's called the Asian Jewish Initiative, which is, again, it's an informal coalitional partnership of various Asian American organizations together with the ADL in terms of looking at areas of interest and being able to create relationships across our two communities.
Okay, thank you. In your essay on impartiality and the information you've given us today, you spoke about your role and experience as CEO of a nonprofit and your service on serving on some of these boards that you talked about as examples of times you've had to, or roles in which you've had to make impartial decisions. And I'm wondering if you could give us a specific example of a time where you had to make a difficult impartial decision that maybe involved setting aside your preference or your self-interest.
I think I would, well, one, I think I would point, well, I'll start with the Alliance for Board Diversity, and I think I point to that because that's outside of my normal realm of work. I think that's one, again, in which I believe that in my role as the chair, I need to be impartial and to ensure that when I speak, whether, for example, when we release the report for media interviews, when I spoke in front of the House Financial Services Committee, I believe that those are times in which I needed to ensure that I be as fair and as impartial as possible in terms of not weighting, giving greater weight to my organization and the Asian American community. Some people would say that I should do that, I should be advocating even more strongly given my role. But I do believe very strongly that if I'm there representing all four of our organizations, I need to give equal weight to each of the organizations. For me, I think that that's a really important part of the kind of my role that I have. I would say that when I work in partnership with other diverse groups, like for example, when we were talking about the boards and commission education event that we did with the African American Board Leadership Institute, WEBEC West, the California Latina Leadership Institute, the LA Women's Public Policy Institute. Again, I think it's really being able to ensure that we have equal representation of each of our diverse communities' voices that are represented as well too. Also, in the course of my work, I just thought of one other example that I'd like to give. So in the course of my work, we work in partnership with not only my Alliance for Board Diversity organization partners, but we also are involved with a annual event that we all do together with Morgan Stanley. It's a big multicultural leaders conference. And one of the things that we all play a role in is suggesting speakers, suggesting topics. And one of the things that I believe that I try to do is to ensure that when I see that there is a lack of representation of speakers from one of the other diverse communities, I try my best to think about and making suggestions for other diverse communities, and not just trying to put forth names from the Asian American community. I think the purposes of these multicultural gatherings is so that we could hear from different people. And so I really try to keep in mind that if that's the case, then I don't want to make it just about Asian Americans. I don't want it to be just about African Americans. I want to see Latinos. I want to see other diverse speakers from other diverse communities involved in this as well too. So I take that role very seriously, and I know that luckily other partners are also doing the same as well too. So.
Thank you. In your first essay, and a little bit so far in your discussion today, you've discussed that as a young person and as a minority within a minority, that you saw engagement as something that was for other people, not people like you. That your voice as an Asian American, as well as those of other diverse Californians, were regularly erased, rendered invisible, and counted for nothing. One of the key objectives that the commission will have to encounter is identifying communities of interest throughout the state, including those that may think similarly to how you viewed engagement as a young person. So having experienced that yourself, do you think that you would have kind of a unique ability to reach out to those communities that normally don't engage with government in order to encourage them to share their perspectives to better inform the commission?
I think that, I'll be honest, I mean, I'm not going to promise that I would be able to in every single case. I think that I can promise, though, is that I would ask the questions, I would advocate and strongly encourage that in cases where there are communities that are not being heard or that do feel like, yeah, they're not included. And actually, one of the ones that I would probably point out to most likely that would feel that way is the Native American community in California. I know that there are various Native American tribes and nations in California, but we don't oftentimes hear from them. And whether or not I would be personally able to reach into, connect with them, that would be hard to say. I have networks that I could try to tap into to see if they could help me connect or help the commission connect. Where I can, I would try my best to ensure that we draw those communities in. I think within the Asian American communities, I would also, or actually within the Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities, I think the communities that I believe are oftentimes overlooked and often I know feel very invisible are the Pacific Islander communities. And I think for that, those are ones in which I would definitely be able to draw from my networks to ensure that their voices are also being heard as best as possible. And I think there are challenges that make it difficult for these communities to be included, but I think as best as possible, I think it's important that we try to create the conditions by which they can also be engaged or included as well too.
Thank you. I have a question kind of similar to one that Mr. Belknap asked earlier about you advocating for representing different diverse groups. But I wanted to frame mine within the context of geography and the various regions throughout the state of California. So I see that you're from Orange County. So I'd like for you to talk a little bit about your experiences in different parts of the state, the people you've met there, and what you've learned from these people about their needs and their desires and their preferences that would make you an effective representative for them on this commission.
So let me start by saying I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley, or East LA. My office is in downtown LA in Little Tokyo. I live in Huntington Beach. I lived for a period of time in San Diego, and I have family members on both my side and my husband's side in Northern California, spread out from the East Bay all the way through down to the South Bay in the peninsula. And so I just have people spread out all over the place. And currently right now, my nephew and his wife are emergency room doctors in Visalia. So I now have a personal connection to Central California as well too. And so I think that was part of what I meant in my essay answers about just having that kind of extensive connection across all of those different regions. I think San Diego is a very different place now than when I was living there almost 30 years ago. And it's interesting remembering making the drive from southern LA to San Diego because I would work in San Diego, but then I would come home on weekends to be at home, see my friends, see my family. My work takes me all across the California region. But I do want to point out to one thing, and I think so because of that, it's really interesting. I think for me, being able to move through all these different geographic regions seems normal, but I will say that sometimes I'm surprised that there are people who never leave a very finite region. There are people that I know who live in the South Bay of Southern California and literally never leave that particular area, or they've grown up in Orange County and have never gone more than 5 miles up the 405 to somewhere. And the same I would see in the South Bay as well too, and so, or in Northern California. But this is part of perhaps who I am. I'm curious, I want to know. My husband and I, we spend time in the Central Coast as well too, partly because of my dog. She freaks out at fireworks, so we make it a point to drive to Monterey so that we're spending some time there. And I know it speaks to a privilege that I have to be able to drive up there. It just alleviates her and alleviates us, but it enables me to see, as we drive through the regions, the different geographies of California. And one of the most impactful experiences that I had that I think really helped me to gain a better appreciation for the Central Valley that I don't think I had other than driving through it was a California Connections program that I did through the Southern California Leadership Network. And it was a California-wide program. We went to San Diego, we were in Southern California, but it was really the visits and the meetings that we had with farmers and with the military folks there, with small business people and educational leaders in the Central Valley that really gave me a different depth appreciation for what the Central Valley is grappling with and how different it can be from the, I would say, Southern California, San Diego, and the Northern California, San Francisco Bay Area kind of issues. And it's really just amazing that in our state we have that kind of diversity, that we have from farmland to the urban landscapes, to the cities, to the suburbs, to, you know, everything and anything in between. And so I think for me, that's what makes California fabulous, but it's also what is going to make California complicated. And that's why I think, to me, having that kind of long-standing knowledge about California becomes important, because over the last 10 years, there has been quite a bit of change. And I think for anybody who would be serving on the commission, I think needs to have a perspective that is rooted in really having some of that understanding of the kind of both geographic changes and what's been wrought in all of our different geographies, but also the demographic changes as well too.
Thank you. Could I get a time check, please?
Yes, we only have 1 minute, 30 seconds remaining.
Okay, great. No further questions at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Dawson?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Akutagawa. Actually, I was going to ask you about the California Connections thing, so you anticipated my question. I did want to ask you about in addition to your leadership of LEAP, you are on many boards, 1, 2, 3, 4 boards I count in your activities. How will you balance your work on the commission if selected with your professional and board commitments?
Mr. Dawson, just a quick time check. We have 5 minutes remaining of the total 90.
Thank you.
I would say that of the boards that I have, the Alliance for Board Diversity, I will be stepping down as the chair as of January 2021. So my time is coming to an end on that particular one. In terms of my role on the other boards, I mentioned that the Asian and Asian American Institute board, that one is fairly low-key, probably meet once a year now. The Japanese American Community Services, that meets, I would say, probably once every other month right now, but I don't anticipate that becoming a problem. We usually meet by phone. And in terms of the California Department of Insurance, we do meet quarterly, but I have the option of meeting by phone on that one as well too. The Asian Pacific Planning and Policy Council one, that did on a monthly basis, but that one, I think they would see my service, if I were to be selected on the commission, as something that would be one in which would be seen as beneficial. So I could either speak to them about taking a leave of absence, or depending on how they would feel, perhaps just allowing me to miss some of the monthly meetings depending on the intensity of the meeting schedule.
All right, thank you. I have no further follow-up. Madam Chair, if there are any follow-ups from the panel?
I do not have any follow-ups. Mr. Belknap?
I do not.
Mr. Coe?
No follow-up questions.
No further follow-up
Madam
questions.
Secretary, how much time is left in the 90 minutes, please?
3 minutes, 10 seconds.
Thank you. Ms. Akutagawa, with the remaining time, we'd like to offer you the opportunity to make a closing statement to the panel if you wish.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me participate in this. I will be honest, I didn't think I was going to get this far. And so it's been a pleasure being able, and an honor being able to be considered as a viable candidate to come this far. I really do believe that this is a chance for me to serve the state and the citizens of California in a way that is different than what I've done in my role as the CEO of a nonprofit organization. I've always felt like I would love to be able to do something more, and I thought that this would be one of those opportunities that would have both impact, but also, more importantly, one in which I can really bring a lot of the skill sets and attributes that I believe that I have that would really enable the work to be done in a way that I think is reflective of what really makes California special. And so I am hopeful that I will have an opportunity to go forward and to be able to be a part of this process and be able to serve the citizens and residents of California. So thank you very much for this consideration and opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Akutagawa, for meeting with us today. Our next interview is at 3 o'clock, so we will recess until 2:59.